Aloha, and thank you for joining us today with on the Believer's Journey. I want to just thank all of you who are watching our program, who pray for our program, who pray for our ministry and support our ministry. I want to thank all of our sponsors, Guerrero CPA, Guerrero Law, Trade Show Displays, and just want to just thank you so much for all you've done for us and realizing that our ministry is growing and growing and touching lives. And we just really appreciate you so much. So, if you haven't subscribed to our channel, please do so at the little subscribe button down below. And if you have any questions or comments you want to make, please put them in the description. I know that a lot of you write emails to me or send it in my messenger. Either way, doesn't matter. Okay, so today I want to talk about something that I think is really, really important that a lot of people, teachers, I don't know, churches, I haven't heard a lot of talk about it, but it's about fellowship with other believers. We talk a lot about Jesus and sin, and we talk about salvation and, characters in the Bible, and we go through step by step. But I think there's this illusion that a lot of people have as Christians that we don't need each other. That all we need is Jesus only, and it's only Jesus we need. And the idea of needing other Christians is really insignificant. And I want to tell you that's really totally true, not true, and it's very unbiblical to think that you don't need one another. In the Old Testament talks about, in fact, the law. I mean, one of the big reasons why we have the law is to have a moral society that we live with one another, honor one another, uplift one another, support one another, strengthen one another, pray for one another, and help each other grow in conduct and lifestyle and holiness for God. And in the New Testament, we have writers. I don't care if it's Jesus or Peter or Paul or John. We have writers that talk about living with one another. And I think that everyone who thinks that, well, all I have to do is stay at church, home from church. I don't need to go to a service because that's just not what you have to do. I can watch it on YouTube, or I can surf the waves. I'm in California. I want to surf the waves, or walk around the forest and not think about people, just God only. I think you have it all wrong, because it's a lot to do with loving one another, and it's very important. If you didn't get involved with other people, I mean, how can we really reach other people or reach the world? And the whole idea here, as a believer in God and in Jesus, is to reach other people and honor them. And so we want to honor Jesus in doing this. So we have lots of scriptures, and I want to start off to tell you that First John, the book of First John, talks a lot about how we need one another. There's that old song, all we need is Jesus. Jesus is all we need. I guess there's maybe two songs. And it's just really theologically incorrect. We need one another. And when John is talking about in First John about how if we do this or do that, if we claim to not have sin, or if we walk in the light, or he's not talking about you. He's talking about we as a fellowship. And he gets into it later on about talking in this fellowship, about loving one another and caring for one another and what it means to love one another. So he gets into this in the book of First John. So I think we need to understand that Jesus himself, and I've talked about this scripture till I'm blue in the face, basically. John chapter 13, verses 34 and 35. Jesus is in the upper room. He tells his disciples, a new command I give you, that you love one another as I have loved you. So basically, and then he goes on with that on verse 35, by loving one another, in other words, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you are as you have loved one another. Okay. So it's important that we are connecting with one another and living with one another in the Lord. In fact, Jesus said, if you love me, next chapter over, verse chapter 14, Jesus says, if you love me, keep my commands, or if you love me, obey me. So, it's just important we understand that. And for all of us who think that we don't need to get involved in the a believers assembly, we're misguided. And I think we need to understand that's very, very important that we get involved in a Bible teaching assembly. Okay, if we want to call it church, is fine, but we all believers are the church. But we are the assembly when we gather together. And it's important that we do that. Jesus even said, where two or three gathered, I am there with you. So he's emphasizing the fact that we need to depend on one another. In First John, I'm not going to read this passage, but in First John chapter 4, you'll get that in my description. He's talking about loving one another and caring for one another. In fact, he says, if you have love for one another, God is perfected within you. I mean, whoa, if you don't love one another, how can you love one another if you don't participate in a lifestyle with one another? It's all part of that. Paul in First Corinthians chapter 12, I think verses 12 to 27, he's talking about unity in the body of believers. Okay. He's talking about how we need to live together. We are all separate parts of a body that come together as one and work as one. I mean, so we're encouraged to do this. In Romans chapter 12, verse 10, it says, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves. So over and over again, we're taught how important it is to just participate with one another and live with one another. It's the way we build our lifestyle, our conduct is so important in the way we live with one another. So our fellowship with one another, other believers, is just so important. It's helps you build your life to become like Jesus. Jesus himself, while he was here, um, he built a believers group of 12 disciples, and he had other people follow him as well. But he built this group and he depended on them. He worked with them. He taught them. He loved them. He trained them and told them to go out and do the same. So it's important that we take this time in our lives to build character by loving and caring and honoring other people. In Philippians chapter 2, in fact, it's chapter 2, verse 3 all the way. Oh, it's 5, 6, 7, I think. But in verse 3 to 4, it says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others, okay, or one another above yourselves, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. See, this is building character. This is helping us to become like Jesus. And we have scriptures telling us that we need to live within each other and take care of each other and honor each other and love each other. And I know I've seen a lot of this. I've been having writing about this. Is why I'm talking about this. Of people feeling like they don't need other believers. And some of you have even written, or I've watched, and on social media. In fact, I'm watching this where people who think that they're of mature status is putting down others who don't believe the same as they do. I mean, the Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible teaches that you need to reach out to those who are less mature than you and build them up. Okay, strengthen them. I mean, if you're not doing that and all you're doing is putting them down, who is the more immature one? I mean, you got to look at it that way. Okay. And finally, I think in Philippians chapter 2, verse 5, as it goes into that same chapter, it says, in your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. Okay. So here we are with a lot of teaching about how we need to be with one another. In Hebrews chapter 10, it says, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves. So we need to think about the fact that we need to come together. We need to meet with one another. I know a lot of you don't like calling, our meetings, our assemblies, the church, because we are the church. Okay, don't call it the church. Call it an assembly. Call it a gathering. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you do partake in it. You do find yourself involved in building up each other in the Lord, because this is our responsibility. This is, we've inherited the church from Jesus. We've inherited this. We have the responsibility to keep it as Jesus set out for it. And it's important that we continue this legacy of Jesus as he walked this earth and got his group of people together and built his church. And then on Pentecost, as Peter went out and preached, and 5,000 came into the church, and then preached again, and 3,000 more came in. And these were all Jews that were coming in. Basically, as he was doing this, we're building the church, we're doing what Jesus taught. And as Paul went out and started building churches in the Gentile lives and cities and towns and countries, we need to understand all of this. And the disciples actually went all over. You had some that went into India, went into Africa, went into Rome. So you have all this different diversity of reaching out to other people. And we need to do that. Look at your world around you. Is the world around you, does it consist of yourself only? Or does it consist of you and, if you're married, your spouse or children or friends only? Or does it consist of other believers, people that you might even have friction with? You have to understand, even Peter and Paul had friction. If you read Galatians, Paul was bothered with Peter, the way Peter was being a hypocrite, the way he was acting toward the Gentiles when the Jews came along. So you read the book, you'll see there is friction in the early church, but they still worked together to build character to honor Jesus and building unity in the body so that we honor each other and honor Jesus. So I want to just emphasize that because I've seen so much recently in my mailbox and other places that a lot of people are thinking they don't need anybody else but Jesus, and they don't need to be involved with other people or a church or a group or assembly. And I think that that's so wrong. We have from the very beginning, when God created, the whole Jewish following there, he talked about the gathering together. He talked about, assembling together and how important it was. So it's not just a new thing from Jesus. This is the Old Testament too. You understand the whole Bible pretty much is consistent with this. Okay. Well, I just wanted to share that today. You will find the scriptures. You can look them up down below in the description area. So you guys all have a wonderful day today. You have a wonderful week, and I will see you and talk to you again in a week. So aloha.